So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending today's e-workshop. We're going to be covering some best practices for liaisons, and I'm really excited because we have some guest speakers today, so you won't just get to listen to me all day. We are capped at an hour. I am happy to stay as long as anybody wants if you have questions. So if anybody has questions at the end and we're going over, I'll be happy to stick around, but we will definitely try to manage your time today. Just to let you know as we get started that this workshop is going to be recorded, so by participating in this workshop, you're giving us your consent to be recorded. Okay, so let's look at our agenda. We're going to start off with some slides from me about best practices, and then we're going to go into the liaison presentations, and then we'll have some Q&A. My name is Jennifer Dickens. If you haven't met me before, nice to meet you all. Welcome. I am the manager of the Business Technology Group here at SRC, and I'm also the co-chair of the Value Chain tab. Those are some of the people that actually helped get this e-workshop in place today, and I'm really excited. I hope it's going to be successful for everybody. Quick note, in case you work with StarNet research, if you were previously considered a StarNet associate, you are now considered a StarNet liaison. If you already thought of yourself as a liaison, you're already ahead of the curve. Okay, so let's start with step one, which is getting involved. So I think it helps to start with an overview of the people involved in the program. So for my example, we're going to talk about an SRC member company, Stark Industries. And Tony Stark is going to be our liaison. I should point out that you do not have to be the owner of a company to be a liaison, but we do have some pretty smart fellows, so I thought this guy was a great selection. The contracting university in our example is Empire State University, also a fictional university, and our PI is Dr. Romanoff. She's a principal investigator of our SRC-funded research. And Dr. Romanoff is advising Peter Parker, who is pursuing his PhD in physics and is also working on the SRC-funded research project. So here we've got our liaison, our PI, and our student all working together. The PI is responsible for conducting the SRC-sponsored research. The student is also working on that research. And the liaison assists by guiding the research, mentoring students, and creating pathways for tech transfer. In this scenario, everybody wins. The PI gets real-world input to her research, and in some cases it's possible for her to test her work on real-world problems. The student is getting to interact directly with industry folks, and the liaison gets to help ensure that the research direction makes sense for the industry. These are examples of how the liaison program can work to maximize your company's membership in SRC, but the liaison program is flexible enough that it can work in a lot of different ways. One PI may want to work exclusively with the liaison, while another will want to let the students and the liaison work together. The liaison might want to attend annual reviews. A different liaison might just want to get notified whenever new publications are available. Some liaisons may visit the university, some will never meet the PI face-to-face. So SRC has created this program for the member companies, and the basics are pretty simple. Liaisons connect member companies to the research and researchers, and how you choose to implement that is really up to you and your company. So let's talk a little bit about how to get involved. It's really easy to sign up as a liaison. You just find a task that you're interested in and click that big green button that says Apply to be a Liaison. There's a really brief form. It's not really an application. It's a really brief form, and it's designed to help those that are involved know more about you and your interests. Another option is to work with a tab member from your company to find tasks that are of interest to your company. Or you may already know a PI who's working on SRC research. There's a number of different ways that you can get signed up as a liaison, and if you're having trouble, ask and we'll help you. I wanted to show you what it looked like when you sign up to be a liaison. We use this apply form. An email gets sent. The email is sent to you, the PI, the students, and any other liaisons from your company. This way everybody's notified, and then everybody has contact information, so it's easy to network with the different people on the research. Let's talk for just a minute about a best practice. one of the ways that your company can benefit from SRC research is by ensuring that the research which is conducted actually meets the needs of your company and the industry. You can work with a university professor to help craft a white paper or a proposal that represents like a specific, significant area of interest or specific research need, and then you can become a sponsor for that project. You can present it to the experts internally at your company and champion it to help it get selected for SRC funding. This is a method that we have definitely seen before, and as we say, it's kind of considered a best practice to make sure that you're getting the work done that you would like to see. Oh, I should take a minute to mention, if you guys have questions, if you guys or gals have questions, you can use the chat feature to chat to Leslie Fairs. She's helping us run this meeting today very smoothly, and send your questions in via chat, and we'll get those addressed. All right, so the second step here we're talking about is staying connected. So in order to talk about how to stay connected to the research project, it's helpful to take a few minutes and look at the varying levels of involvement that you as a liaison can have. And I've tried to kind of capture a few examples here. What we have learned about is that the more engaged you are, the more value you're going to get from the program and from your membership. That means that any level of involvement is of benefit to you, even if it's just a handful of hours in a year. The more time you're able to devote to the assignment, then the more value you're going to get to you, your company, and the PIs and the students as well. It's also really helpful to understand what your company's expectations are when you join the program, because different companies kind of leverage this program in different ways. And I talked before about how the program is really flexible and allows you to sort of make it what you need it to be. And the same is true when you think about the fact that different companies have different culture and they use the liaison program in different ways. So you may want to talk internally with your management or your tab members to make sure that you understand what your responsibilities and expectations are when you sign up to become a liaison. So if you become involved in the research, the best results are going to be gained from open paths of communication. So in a perfect world, Peter Parker is going to be able to work directly with Tony Stark. Tony Stark could visit the lab at Empire State University. Parker could use the tools and materials available only within the company's labs. Professor Romanoff could get advice from Stark about how her research can best be used in real-world scenarios. And Stark could even hire Parker for a summer internship or perhaps even hire him as a full-time employee. It's the responsibility of not just the liaison, but also the PI and the student to maintain their end of communication. And with that, I want to present another best practice, which is sort of a communication plan. So understanding that not all liaisons are going to be interacting regularly with PIs, if you are going to be interacting with the PIs and students, it's really helpful to set expectations. And so what I've outlined here is a set of recommendations that I think are helpful, good ground rules. You want to make sure that you and the PI understand how often you're going to communicate. Try to get the students to present the work so that the students have the opportunity to grow their presentation skills. Figure out how often you need to meet. If you find yourself at a conference where you know that your students are at, definitely plan to have a meeting then. And of course, you just always want to maintain a friendly and professional relationship. Okay, so let's go to step 3, which is about attaining results. So another of my best practices that I've outlined is seeking understanding with the PI. So your company is paying for research at some of the best universities in the world, accomplishing research goals that are going to further your company and the industry. And the best way that you can take advantage of this membership is through the liaison program. So I've outlined a couple of things that I think are really helpful, and this is information that I heard not just from PIs that I interviewed, or not just from liaisons that I interviewed, but also from PIs that I interviewed. They want to hear specifically what you want when you're giving them input about research direction. I think that they don't necessarily want you to They don't want you to beat about the bush. They want you to tell them what they need to hear, nicely, of course, in a friendly and professional manner. If you are taking time out of your schedule to work as a PI, it's helpful to understand what information you need from them to justify your commitment to the project. So work with the PI to make sure that that's clear so that the PI can provide you with that information. And then help make sure the PI is on track with the scope of the research and the deliverables. It's really great if you can attend the reviews to support the project, and you can do that either in person or remotely. And most important is that you can communicate internally with your TAB member to ensure that there are good comments and positive ratings for when your projects are being reviewed. This is kind of what makes or breaks the research for the PIs. Yeah. So let's go back and look at that engagement model that we saw earlier, but this time let's look at how you derive value from these different levels of engagement. So when you're engaged, you have the opportunity to grow your personal knowledge, you can create points of contact into your company. You become more engaged, you're able to better impact the research direction, you get early access to research ideas, and you can bring those ideas back into your company. And when you're most engaged, you're going to have a much bigger impact from start to finish in the research, as well as transferring that technology into the company. And that's one of those things that people really like about this program is the tech transfer into the company. I want to show you all of the different avenues. So tech transfer that's occurring in both directions is really important in your ability, in your company's ability to extract value from your SRC membership. So the more involved you are, the more tech transfer is going to occur. And what I've tried to do here is just outline a number of different ways that the tech transfer can occur via liaisons. And this is a great little list that you could print out and hang up on your wall and make sure you can circle a bunch of these. You can play bingo with it or something. I also wanted to point out that some of our liaisons, a number of our liaisons are award winners for the Mahbub Khan Outstanding Liaison Award. And this is a really a great set of individuals who have been nominated in the community as outstanding liaisons. And in fact, the people that are going to be speaking today are all Mahbub Khan Award winners. So I wanted to suggest that if you are looking for advice as a liaison, if you're starting out, if you have any kind of issue, you could certainly seek out the Mahbub Khan Award winners in your company. And I've put the little link up there. If you go to the liaison page on the website, you can find a list of all of the Khan Award winners for the past 10 or 15 years. So I thought it might be interesting for you to kind of connect with one of those people and maybe get some advice or information from them if you needed it. Okay, so we've actually reached the end of my slides. I have a couple of liaisons that I would like to introduce to you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker. His name is Sean King, and Sean King is from Intel. He has won the Mahbub Khan Award in 2015, and he has been a liaison on 23 projects since 2008. And I'm going to, Sean, are you on the line still? Ready to go? Okay, it looks like you're ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and move forward to Sean's slide, and I'm going to let you take it over from here, Sean. Sean's going to talk about commitment and helping the users.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Just to make sure you can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. As my first foil here points out, I guess my key message here is that as an SRC liaison, one of your key roles is to provide a guiding and helping hand to the PI and the students that you're working with. And as my first bullet here says, SRC funding is a absolutely essential and key ingredient to the projects that the PI and the graduate student are working on, but it only goes so far. And really for these projects to be successful and to be exceptionally successful as we want them to be as a liaison, you're probably going to have to help provide some other things to the project that the PI is working on. And to help you figure out what those things are, one of the first things you have to do as a liaison is understand the needs of both the PI and the student. And as it says in one of these next bullets, one of the first things that I recommend you do if you're just joining a project is to understand who are the other liaisons that are signed up for this project. Are there other people from your corporation that are perhaps more senior that are already liaisons? Are there, any prior relations between the PI and other liaisons? And, are they, potentially former employees of other SRC member companies and they're going to have a very close relationship? Or, are you the first liaison to sign up for that particular project or particular task? And, depending on what that dynamic is, you may either be, the PI may be leaning on you very heavily for support, or you may actually find that you're going to be a little bit more of an annoyance to them if the PI already has, 20 different liaisons signed up for that project, and you're just going to be another voice chiming in, making his life complicated. And so in those kind of situations, you might be better, you might help the PI better by just not trying to engage him directly all the time. Now, once you've figured out what the other liaisons involved with the project are and what the relationships are, the next thing you should do is, try to find out what they're limited by. And for the types of SRC research that I'm involved with, usually the projects break down into either the PI is an expert in some type of metrology, and he's needing industry standard or industry relevant samples to look at, or the PI is making, state-of-the-art materials and devices, and he's metrology limited. And so as a liaison, you can try to help bridge that gap by either providing them industry-related relevant samples or, helping them find metrology that they can use at your company potentially to help them get the additional information that they need to make their project successful. So those are, kind of more tangible things that you can help the PI with. On the intangible side of things, there's other things that you can do as a liaison to help the project be successful. You can provide technical advice. You can provide potentially training to the PI or the student. There's all different sorts of ways that can be done. And also you can provide, what is the relevance of their research to the industry. And a lot of projects I've been involved with, the PI is an absolute expert on a particular metrology, but he has really no clue how that metrology pertains to the industry or to the particular problems that we're trying to address. And so as a liaison, you can kind of bridge that gap for him by providing that relevance. The last thing I have under the section of understanding the needs is also, helping the PI find additional funding. You can do all sorts of things, such as writing letters of support for proposals they might be writing to other funding agencies such as DOE, NSF, things of that nature. Eventually the student is going to graduate and need to find a job. You can help make their life easier by helping them find the job. Internships were mentioned. That can be something to help the student get through their graduate training. So those are things that I would suggest that you think about when you sign up for a project in terms of understanding the needs of the PI. What I have next is how do you actually help them attain what they need? And there's all sorts of ways you can do that. If what the PI needs is industry relevant metrology, and you happen to own that metrology, you can do it directly. You can just volunteer your time to do the analysis for them. Similarly, if they're needing industry relevant samples and you make those samples, you can provide that to them directly. Also have donate equipment here if you happen to own equipment that's in your lab that's no longer being utilized, and the PI could use it. You could think about potentially donating that to the PI to get them going. Now, where it gets interesting is where you don't directly control what the PI needs. Say you're a metrology type person and the PI needs samples. Well, that becomes a little bit more challenging. And what I have here is to potentially barter. Is there potentially something at that university that the other colleagues in that PI's department needs that you can provide that will then allow that PI to get what he needs. And you would be surprised sometimes, how the budgets work at universities. A PI may not need a water chiller, but someone else in the department may need a lot of them. And if you can provide a water chiller to that department, that may free up money in their budget that can then be attributed to the PI that you're working with. So those types of things are ways that you can indirectly get the PI what he needs based on what you're able to provide. After that, I have other ways you can help them provide. You can help provide what they need. I've already talked about internships, letter supports. As was mentioned earlier in the presentation, you can also invite them out to your company to speak. That helps get them understand the relevance. But other things you can do along those lines is to help organize conferences. You can organize a conference and then invite that PI to give an invited talk in your conference or in your symposium. These types of things, particularly for early career PIs that haven't achieved tenure, these types of things can really help them along the way. And then the last thing I have is, additionally, how can you help them find additional support? And let's say I gave the example of bartering on the university side. Well, what if what they need are industry relevant samples, and again, you're a metrology person and you don't have a direct control of those samples? Well, you can do bartering on the inside of your company as well. And so this is where you need to potentially grow and tap into your internal network. And one example I'll give you here is one of the PIs that I've worked with in the past needed a TEM measurement done, and he needed some XPS measurements done. And I don't control any of those at my corporation, but by understanding what the TEM and XPS people here are at my corporation need, I was able to provide them with some samples that they needed to do their measurements, and that made them more willing to do additional measurements on samples from universities. And so that's another way that you can indirectly help get things that your PI needs to be successful. And that's pretty much my what I have to contribute here.
Sorry, trigger figure.
Yeah.
Sean, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. When I had spoken with Sean previously, I really felt like he had some really interesting ideas about how to help the PI succeed, and so that's what I asked him to focus on, especially the idea of helping exchange technology and samples, pieces, parts, that kind of thing. So thank you so much, Sean. Okay, so let's move to our next speaker, Lou Nguyen from TI. And the thing that I had asked Lou to talk about was managing commitment and workload. That's clearly something that we are all needing to learn more about probably every day. I checked into our records, and you have been a liaison on 27 projects since 1993, and if I'm not mistaken, a 3-time Con Industry Award winner. So that's pretty awesome. And Lou, if you are ready, I will go ahead and go to your slides.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. So this is a topic that Jennifer asked me to talk about, how to manage your commitment and workload. And so I have a cartoon on the left side here which says that what we really want. And if you can click on the next one, essentially we all are juggling different things, right? And so this is what we really want, juggling a lot of balls in the air. And what we don't want is the next one in the picture here. So this is the one here. You want to juggle many balls, but you don't want to be caught underneath here like this poor fellow, right? And so in order to do work well in SRC, please stick around. Okay. What I would suggest is that you need to talk to the management, right? And you need to include the task of being a liaison of a specific project as part of your individual goals. And essentially, that has to be it because there is really no way to get around it. That this is not something that you want to do when you have a free time, that type of thing. So it has to be part of the goal so that you can justify that you are spending some time on that. And as Jennifer has pointed out earlier, there are different levels of engagement in there, and to be able to essentially leverage the best thing for the company, you really have to aim for the model of being highly engaged or at least moderately engaged. And essentially, that's a reminder that essentially you need to interact regularly with the PI and the students, visit the university, visit the lab, invite the PI and the students over to present at the company and meet them and talk to your colleagues. And of course, if there's a chance, also recruit the students for internship. And last but not least, of course, attending the TechCon, the annual TechCon meeting or the annual review, so that you get the feedback from not just the PI but other SRC member companies and how they view the program. The feedback would also be useful to help you guide the project. So the second bullet that I want to point out also is that you really need to have alignment with the management, and that essentially helps you to get the proper resources. And by this, essentially, I mean you can allocate some time to interact with the student and the PI. You will need to essentially justify the traveling time. And as the previous speaker, Sean, had talked about, at some point in time, there will be a need to provide samples or doing some kind of in-kind support to help out also. And so being aligned with the management will help you justify all those things. And so my suggestion also is that you need to bring your activities to essentially give it more visibility. And so one way to do that is maybe have regular reviews. It could be quarterly, it could be semi-annual reviews with either your immediate manager or maybe one level up, so that essentially it gives the project a little bit more visibility. And if you start to mentor these things, one of the things that SRC will ask at the end of each year is give a compelling reason, on the project why the company would be interested in funding this kind of activity. And so by being actively involved in the project, seeing different results and directions on how these things pan out, that would give you many ideas on how to fill out that form and essentially bring things back to the company. And the third bullet that I want to point out also, and that Jennifer has mentioned earlier, was that it would be a good idea to link with your company tab member so that there is a better internal coordination in terms of review activities, in terms of getting feedback, that type of thing, so that all of these three activities would essentially help you do the job much better in terms of mentoring a project, or in some cases maybe more than one project at a university. The next foil, Jennifer. So these are maybe like preaching to the choir, right? But the thing that usually when I approach somebody who has never mentored before an SRC project, and also the manager, is that you want me to do what? Usually there are only 24 hours in a day. This is on top of what I have to do extra. So you really have to sit down and discuss, what you will get out as individual working with the university, and also what the company would get out. But the one I want to point out here is that there are ways to do things and work up more efficiently. So Jennifer, if you click one. So I just want to highlight that there are things like these books are available, readily available, and maybe a lot of you have seen these things before. Setting priorities and time management. Stephen Covey, this is a book that was written in 1989, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. David Allen, Getting Things Done. Robert Posen, Extreme Productivity. So I think that you have a chance, read these things. It's very easy reading, and it can be boiled down to a few things, which I put down on the right side here. But essentially, it would help out, essentially increase the productivity. So I have boiled down some of these things from the 3 books. Essentially, when you work on these things, get the priorities straight. Essentially, focus on things that are really critical rather than things that are pressing. And then you have to stick with the discipline of essentially, getting those things straight. And there is the second thing is there's such a thing as a law of diminishing returns, right? So if you work on a task and only up to a certain point, essentially it's good. You don't want to be turning something that is mediocre, and if you spend more time on that, essentially it will not bring you a lot more out of that. And then the third bullet that I thought was interesting out of these books is that they say avoid being a perfectionist because you can create good work for your customers, but perfection is mainly for yourself, because perfection is an idea that depends very much on how one defines it. So I thought that I would put these 4 together, that essentially it fits into this commitment and workload, and hopefully it will give you some ideas on how to get the most out of these things. And as usual, in a lot of cases, when we look at these interaction or essentially work with SRC, people would think of that as something that as an aside type of thing rather than a main part of the goal. So hopefully that gives you some ideas on how to move along with these things. That's what I have, Jennifer.
Lou, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I think that was really helpful and definitely something I need to apply to my life. So, okay, so our last speaker today is Henning Bronish from Intel. Two-time Mahbub Khan Award winner and has been working on SRC research projects as a liaison since 2002. So, Henning, if you are ready, I will turn it over.
Yep.
There you go.
Hey, this is Henning from Intel. Thanks, Jennifer. And so Jennifer asked me to talk a little bit about what is called technology transfer. Hope you guys can hear me okay. So this technology transfer, right, it sounds pretty trivial or pretty straightforward, really. As Jennifer outlined originally, right, Professor Natasha Romanov, she may come up with some brilliant idea, she proposes it, and Tony Stark comes in, he funds it, and then the student does much of the work, Peter Parker. And at the end, maybe after 3 years, we're just going to take the results and use them in our company. Now, generally speaking, in my experience, it probably wouldn't work out very well like that if we just kick it off and then let it go and then just take it at the end. What I found also in the projects that I mentor here was direct Intel funding. So we do some research projects that are not only SRC, but some of them are funded directly by Intel. So I have done a few other projects as well. And in that process, what I found, the best way to do it in terms of technology transfer is really to mentor the project through its entire life cycle, essentially from the very beginning of the creation of the project all the way to the end, say, after the 3 years and actually beyond the 3 years, as I will explain in a sec. So, and Jennifer actually mentioned some of that in her part of the presentation already. She called it like doing it from the ground up. Essentially, we need to make sure that the whole research project is aligned to our needs and what we really want to get out of it. And so the best way to do it is actually to influence the proposal itself. In fact, in some cases, what has happened that I had discussions with the PI and actually suggested a problem to them. So obviously, we're not going to go and write the proposal for the PI. That's really the PI's job. But we could definitely give them a challenge or some problem that we think is important for us to be solved. And actually, what we also do in that stage, typically we try to avoid to give problems to the university that we could actually solve ourselves inside the company. We're actually more interested in not using them, say, as some sort of an external lab or a virtual lab of some sort, but rather really give some problem out there that we have no clue how to solve. And that way we can really end up leveraging like the intellectual capacity that these universities really do have, and try to get something out of it we could not get otherwise. So that is sort of the first step. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, you can go and actually sponsor the proposal also inside of your company and help it along so that it will actually end up getting selected. You can also talk to your colleagues at the other SRC member companies, maybe at conferences and so forth. And then as the project then starts off, definitely we do want to have regular update conferences. Typically I target a monthly teleconference. Sometimes it slips a little bit, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. For sure, I set a reminder in my calendar to make sure that we do set up the next update teleconference. Unless, as in the next bullet, actually you are able to get your student to actually take ownership of all of this him or herself. I've had actually a few students that were really great about it. We tell them, okay, so our goal here is to have a monthly meeting. Why don't you contact us and coordinate with your professor when we can meet? And some of them were really very, very good about it. So they would essentially own the meeting schedule and then also have a list of deliverables. And we would start out each meeting with sort of checking where we are at in the project and essentially monitor the progress against the overall schedule of the project. This then helps tremendously when it comes to like annual review presentations. And the other thing about the student is what I have tried to do, and we were able to do this in a few cases, to bring the student to your company as a summer intern. One time I had it, the student was able to come during the summer just before the project even started. And that way we could teach them some of the tools that we use, like modeling and simulation tools. And also they would get a much, much better idea what this whole project is even supposed to be about. Or try to do it early on in the project so that that internship really has an influence on the rest of the actual research project. I call it year one. Like typically these projects are 3 years long, as you know. Another thing that then can come out of it is that you actually help along also with the doctoral thesis. You may be able to serve on the advisory committee, which will just be another way to influence the whole progress. So they always, many universities do offer the possibility that a member of the industry is actually one of the committee members on the students' advisory committee. In my case, later on, I was offered like an affiliate associate professorship at the university, and at that point you're actually a faculty member. And that then allows you to actually be one of the university faculty members on the committee. Then that makes it even easier. But generally, you should always be able to actually join as one of those industry members. And that is great. And then you can help also proofreading the thesis and making sure everything is documented in a scientific and good way and all of that. And you have always access to everything firsthand. Another thing is visits to the university campus. Like originally, I was told like we should target like an annual visit to the university. Now with travel budget restrictions, it may become a little bit more difficult. And as Jennifer mentioned, perhaps we can leverage some other opportunities, such as being at a conference or at the same conference you realize we are all going to be there. So do set up a face-to-face meeting at that time so that you can take advantage of that. And so that often works out very easily. Then you can sit down, do your review face-to-face, and also talk about some of the other things about the project. Now, in the case of SRC, it gets sometimes a little bit more complicated because there are multiple member companies, and you may have liaisons, more than one liaison, and even from different companies. Then you can try to coordinate start and perhaps come up with some creative ways to manage that part. Now, of course, you can transfer technology also through publications. That's generally transferring the knowledge to the industry, and everybody can take advantage of that. Of course, also at the end of the project, you may be able to hire the student and that way transfer all of that knowledge in form of the person, him or herself. But now, when it then comes to the end of the project, so typically the last year of the project, we do want to have a clear focus on the technology transfer. Actually have deliverables in the project that specifically target that. So in my case, for modeling and simulation, what we have often done is, like, for example, create a demonstration computer code, something that could be transferred to the company to demonstrate it over here. We also had demonstrations of hardware in our lab, and we would invite people to come and basically see how all of this works in real life. And the student came and set it all up, and they brought some of their own equipment to be able to do that. So that would be another idea how you kick off this technology actual transfer to the company. Now, there's one very important point. In many cases, so especially if you start a project, like I said early on, that is a little bit more in the creative space, and the outcome may be something really new. In those cases, there's often what I found a significant gap. Essentially, the research has been done, but the company may not have anybody or any department really to receive that research at that point, because they may have simply a shorter time horizon for projects, and they're not able to essentially consume those research outcomes. So in that case, it is great if you are able to actually pick up this research yourself and carry it on inside the company, say for a year or sometimes up to 2 years. Essentially what happens then, you can modify the problem statement to all of your internal constraints and needs, many of which, for example, will be confidential. You would not have been able to explain these details or even disclose them to the university, so they could not know about that. But now you can apply it to your internal problems without any restrictions, and essentially redo a little bit some of that research or apply it now to your own problems. And one way then what we do is, like, maybe in modeling and simulation, perhaps we use our own model, and then we show that this method may actually work, and that is then something you can use to show to other people inside of your company. Essentially, you internalize the research during that time, which typically is after the project has actually ended. And that way, the project essentially stays alive. It's not just being shelved and then perhaps never being used by anybody, or it's just papers out there in the literature. And so once that internal proof of concept has been delivered, then you can actually take it and hand it over to your internal customers and actually give it to them in a form that they consume, or actually just use those techniques or ideas or whatever came out of the research. So that would be actually really ideally how you can transfer the technology. Start very early on, make sure the research is aligned to your interests. Sometimes the PIs come from totally different fields and they had never worked on, say, microelectronics in the past, but they do have great ideas once they start working on it, so we align it, and then we come in and basically bring it inside the company and really give it to our own internal customers. That's all I wanted to say, I guess. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much for letting us know about that. That's why I chose to not say that myself. I knew he would do a better job. So, all right. So we have reached the end of our formal presentations. I'm going to just pull up a little slide here for best practices. I do want to let everybody know, and we can take a minute to look at this in a few minutes, but on the SRC homepage, there's a link at the top for the liaison page, and the recording of this event is going to be there, and we'll have documentation that we'll be adding over the next week or so that will underscore the things that we've covered today. So I'm going to start off the question and answer, and I'm going to be asking our liaisons. Anybody out there who wants to answer can kind of let us know. The first question is from Archie Hu from TI, asking whether it is proper for the liaison to contact the student directly and bypass the PI. I'm going to give a first swipe at this, but certainly if anybody wants to add some color to this, you can. I think that you certainly want to be friendly and professional, as we discussed earlier. So if you want to maybe send the student an email, I'd probably have you copy the PI so that the PI understands. And then you should be able to get a feel for the relationship that the PI is interested in and find out, because some PIs do want you to work directly with them, while others want to encourage working with the students more. I think you just want to be professional about that and make sure you don't kind of exclude. But if the PI is all for it, go for it.
Exactly.
Oh, good. Somebody agrees. Terrific. Okay, Archie, thank you for that question. I did want to ask, Doug Garrity from TI is on the line. Doug has been a liaison since 1997 and two-time winner of the Khan Award. You guys are so great. Doug, I wanted to find out from you if your experience as a design guy has been any different than any of the things that we've covered, or if there are any aspects to it that are a little nuanced. Do you think you could take a minute to talk about that?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Okay. First of all, I'm at NXP, not TI. Not that
Sorry.
matters that much, but, you know.
I was looking at the wrong note. Apologies.
No problem. So I thought the advice that and the experiences that have been presented were excellent, and I don't really have too much to add. From a design perspective, usually the PIs and the students need silicon or access to silicon, and sometimes the problem that you're trying to get the research done for is specific to a process technology. And so being able to line up the PI and the students' needs with your company's needs and get them an opportunity for a test vehicle so they can publish their papers and graduate and everything is really critical. So that just takes all the things that were said, you know, being involved from the very, very beginning, and then getting people inside the company involved so that you can provide such an opportunity to the students and the professors so they can get their research fabricated, measured, and published. Other than that, everything that was said I think was just outstanding, and I agree completely with all of it.
All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so we're going to open the floor. Are there any more questions? You want to ask a question on the conference, on the telecon, you can, or you can send us a chat. Inquiring minds want to know.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Praneet from IBM.
Hey, Praneet. Go ahead.
Hey, my question was generally for some of these liaisons, how they handle the multi-PI situation, like if they had people from different companies as liaisons, sorry, not multi-PI, multi-liaison interactions, and is there any best practices around that, or that you could talk about?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. That was like the advanced version of this event. So I didn't have any slides about it, but I did learn about it from several of the PIs and liaisons that I talked to. And in the same way that your company culture affects the way that your liaison program works, it affects the way that you interact with multi-liaison projects. And it really can run the gamut from a PI that is really good friends with a liaison and has a very strong relationship to a PI that works equally with all of the liaisons on his or her task. And I think it comes down to making sure that you're sort of following that friendly professional relationship guideline and there are some cases where PIs, where the liaison can actually facilitate the PI signing an NDA if there is some information that they need to be exposed to further the research. It's one of the things that a liaison can do to make a research project better. It doesn't happen all the time, certainly, but it's an option. I think that it is a balance for everyone in our program to really understand that we're working sort of together to get the research done, but of course everybody's working at different companies, and so they have their own interests. I think generally everybody does a really good job of balancing that, and this is another opportunity for people to figure out that balance, and a lot of that is going to depend on the liaison, it's going to depend on the PI, and it's going to depend on the research. So I think I just answered your question with a lot of depends, but I think that's what it comes down to is kind of depends on the people that are involved. You know, we certainly suggest a friendly professional relationship, and then, you know, if you have something that does need to be disclosed, you could facilitate an NDA.
Okay.
Okay, and I just got a couple SRC folks here with me, and they want me to reiterate that we are here to help, and that's a really great thing to remember. So there are times when your PI is not helpful, and there are times when the liaison is not helpful. And this is very rare when these things happen, but in cases like that where there are conflicts or concerns and you're not quite sure how to resolve a problem, you definitely want to reach out to your SRC contact, the contract monitor, or whoever else you're working with at SRC to help us fix whatever might be going wrong. Does that help?
Yep. Thank you.
Great. That was a great question. Thank you. You guys are like perfect timing. So does anybody have any other questions? I'm going to take just a minute and pull up the SRC website. I just want you to see the page that we created, if you haven't already, for the liaisons. And it's a, oh goodness gracious. So if you go to the liaisons button here up at the top, we've got a little home page here, and we'll have a link to the recording of the C workshop, so it'll be easy to access. And you can access your company's liaison assignments from here, which is always fun to look at. And we'll be adding more documentation based on the outcome of this presentation to here as well. And it's nice and easy because the apply button is here. If you know what research you're looking for, you can apply from that button as well. Okay, well, I think we're going to call it if nobody has any more questions.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all the speakers to attend, and thank you everybody for your time and attention today. We really appreciate it.
Bye.